Hey, boys and girls, buffaloes and bunnies.
Hey.
Weather report for October 11th, 2021. Managing you people is like herding cats sometimes. Jesus.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, well, it's a little quieter in here now. It's more quiet now. That's pretty good.
Yep.
Anyway. So I had a good talk with Rebecca on Saturday at 10 a.m. And I think we're going to have another one on Saturday at 10 a.m. With Demeter wants a piece of the bread of life. He was pretty anxious. And I think who else has requested having a one-on-one with her? I think there were some others.
Lots of people. Top Dog, I think, is emailing back and forth.
Yeah, I think it would be cool if we could get Erica to do a one-on-one with her.
Yeah, so I think I got exactly out of the interview what I wanted to get out of it. I mean, I wasn't so like in the comments, somebody was saying, she clearly won. That was that weenie. He said she clearly won the exchange. It wasn't a debate, you idiots. It was an interview.
Yeah.
What the hell? I think I found a little bit about the way creationists think, and a little bit, and I think it highlighted the differences in how we evolutionists think and how creationists think. And I think my analogy to the erosion of a mountain, I mean, it's nuanced, and you could look at that a couple of different ways, but I think it made a lot of sense that we know how erosion works because we can test it in the laboratory, right? We can take a rock and we can blast it with other, sand particles, and we can measure the rate at which little crystals break off, and we can actually, I mean, in fact, they've done a lot of work with that, with erosion, and then we can infer that a 5-mile mountain turned into a 1,000-foot hill in X number of years, by measuring those rates, right? And now you could say, we're just telling a story that it was wind and water that wore that mountain down. I mean, it could well have been a giant glacier, right? 7-mile high glacier. I mean, it could have been something else. But we can infer a certain story about how something happened in the past. And that's kind of how that leads us into a discussion about theories, what a theory is supposed to do and what it's supposed to predict. But anyway, you two can talk now. I know I yelled at you.
Okay.
I know I yelled at everybody. Did I yell at everybody? Am I crabby today?
Yes, I'm sitting here silently weeping and holding my puppy dog. So I need to get some tissues, and then maybe after that I'll be okay. I'll be ready to talk.
Okay, I'll send you a cookie, Scott.
Yeah. So you were talking about other people that wanted to talk with Rebecca, and Andrew was definitely one of them. He really wanted to jump in while you were having the discussion.
Yeah, and I don't quite understand how nobody seems to get this whole one-on-one thing that people have on some channels. And, I guess it isn't our style typically, but we're going to do more of that. And because it's the only way to actually get anywhere,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm sure she'll, when we were backstage, I was mentioning, I'm sure she's going to jump on again at some point. She visits every now and then the weather report. The weather report is, 5 days a week. So I'm sure she will jump in, and we'll just have to maybe let one person just have a, discussion for 15 or 20 minutes. One, like Andrew can take 20 or 30 minutes or however long it takes for them to have a quick discussion
Yeah.
and top dog maybe or something and whatever. Yeah. Could
In
do
the
it like
last few
that.
days, I made a promise to myself that when I get a whole bunch of people in the room, I'm going to put almost everybody in the back room except for 2 people at a time. And just let 2 people talk, and then
Yeah.
switch it
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can
And
do
I
that.
don't want anybody to be offended by that, but it's just that we get 10 people in the room, it just kind of like I think the whole discussion goes downhill at some
Yeah.
point.
I mean,
I
I
mean,
have self-control. I can keep my mouth shut and not,
Yeah,
interfere if somebody's having a conversation. But a
Yeah.
lot of people can't. But yeah,
it's just a lot easier, to let
Yeah.
let 2 people talk and have it
Yeah.
out, and then switch out and let somebody else have a shot or whatever.
well, when it comes to the Christians, I mean, if you have a Christian in here, and just about the whole room is all atheists, right? Usually it's one Christian and 6 or 7 atheists. So it's better to do a one-on-one, like you said, because otherwise it's, people end up ganging up on or it seems that way. I mean, most of the time we try not to do that, but I mean, people are anxious and they want to ask questions when the conversation's going. Somebody, each person wants to throw their 2 cents in, so it's.
Yeah. I did yell at Peter. I didn't really yell at you. I just told you that we got 6 or 7 copyright strikes for the music on that
Oh,
last
really?
video. Every
Oh,
one of
boy.
them was a separate copyright strike. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And it only affects monetization, and I'm not monetized anyway, so it doesn't affect me. But it just kind of,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I like to keep things uncopyright struck, just because I don't want to turn into praise. Who has a strike on almost every video he's ever done, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was worth it. So.
Yeah, it sucks that you can't do that because that was fun. I mean, some people, not every person likes the humor, but I thought it was great, and a lot of people in chat did.
That just turns out being advertisement for their music. I mean,
yeah,
why would they have a problem with that? But,
yeah.
So what do you think of your conversation, Andrew, with Danny about theories?
It was okay, I guess, or I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, so I think what Danny was saying was that.
Wait, did you make a list of the comments in red and yellow and green?
Yeah.
Looks kind of weird.
Well, it's really easy to do. It's really not all that difficult. No, not that hard. I wouldn't
know because I'm not a programmer.
Oh, well, if you know how to use a spreadsheet, it's pretty easy to do because I capture the chats in a spreadsheet, and then
you can even do conditional coloring of the cells based on the value of like column B. Like if it's an Andrew, make it green. If it's a Otangelo, make it look stupid.
What do you take a theory to be? So anyway, what I take a theory to be, like theory of evolution, is a big gigantic bag full of causal mechanisms and facts that we've eked out over the last 100 years or whatever. And like Danny, I think, was saying that he was trying to say that the theory of evolution is nothing but nothing but a history, right? A discussion about history and not a theory at all, that it wasn't science.
And I strongly disagree with that.
Yeah. So I think where he misunderstands is he thinks that a theory should predict what's going to happen in the future. And that's not a theory. That's called more like a seance, or, consulting a tarot card reader.
Like predicting if you drop a ball, where is it going to land or something like that?
Yeah, well, you could predict. You could make a fine prediction, like if you dropped the ball, where it was going to land. But then, what if a gust of wind came up and it didn't land there?
Right. Because I know of plenty of scientific theories that don't do that. You have germ theory, which doesn't say, oh, well, if this germ evolves, what's it going to do, or what kind of organelles is it going to have? It just explains things, and I think that's more key to the issue here is theories explain things, these big overarching questions. They don't predict the future, or at least they don't do it all the time.
Well, yeah, but if you take one aspect of the theory, right? One thing about haploid or diploid genes and sexual reproduction or whatever, you can predict one particular little tiny result in a laboratory if you control all the other conditions.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But you're not going to make a prediction if you don't control the conditions, because that's how this works. And
right, like the scenarios are very nuanced and specific when you're making predictions. Otherwise, you couldn't make a prediction.
Right. But I mean, the theory of evolution is not supposed to predict whether or not insects are going to develop a thump thump noise in the next 100 years. That's not going to happen. You can't. I mean, look at the theory of molecular interaction or chemistry or orbital theory or whatever. Okay, suppose a hurricane comes in and knocks the laboratory down and 1,000 different reagents mix on the floor. Does the theory of chemistry, can they predict what compounds are going to be formed? No. Does that mean the theory of chemistry is just natural history? Right? You understand what I mean? That's kind of his criticism, that because their environments change, genomes change, there's random mutations, there's genetic drift, there's all sorts of unpredictable things. There's no way to predict what the diversity of species is going to be 100,000 years from now.
If how you're describing it is true, that kind of sounds like general relativity, the curvature and geometry of space-time around different regions of the universe depends on the mass and energy around it, like, and it can vary a lot based on the specific scenarios. Does that mean that that's natural history, or that that's not explanatory or mechanistic? I certainly don't think so.
Yeah, he's blathering more stuff now, so it's hard to keep up with him. But we do have some stuff that he did blather the other day. Oh, also, Otangelo, kind of trolling a little bit here. Andrew Cumming, I'm not interested in your opinion. You should be more humble and be open to learn. Well, yeah, if he's not interested in your opinion, why should you be interested in learning from him?
That's true.
I don't quite understand. So, okay, let's see. A set of interrelated hypotheses that confirm the same basic idea from many independent lines of evidence. Yeah. So a theory is like, when you think about, okay, where is the theory of evolution? What is it? Has anybody written it down in a book? No. No.
That's why that's why I've kind of heard using the phrase "the theory of evolution" is kind of silly, because it would be more accurate to say evolutionary theory, because there's, like you said, there's not a big list of rules or anything.
Compendium of evolution or anything like that. So I mean, so most of these criticisms kind of fall flat, because and the other thing is that most scientists that are working on this stuff haven't thought about any of this stuff for like probably in their entire career, or maybe once or twice, and it's like, what is the theory of evolution and what does it do? And it's like, no, that isn't quite how the work is done. Everybody's down in the minority.
In general, scientists don't deal with metaphysics or epistemology that much. They just honestly don't care.
Yeah, and he made a comment down here that most scientists don't know anything about it. I think it's more like they don't really give a shit. I don't know.
I think Danny wants in to give his take on it.
Oh, I don't really want him in here. He just, all he does is tries to control the conversation. And
well, I'd like to have a one-on-one with him, at least for a few minutes. Maybe I misunderstood him.
Yeah, I can let you have a one-on-one with him. So I'll go ahead and send him a link for that. But let's see. I just wanted to look at some of the stuff that he said. Andrew, do you think there are theories of history? I think there are. I think actually, I don't know. I'm not a historian, but I'm guessing that those guys get into that a little bit, right?
I mean, I guess you could consider it that way, but I wouldn't say it's the same kind of theory as
well, there's a field of historiography, and I'm wondering if they have theories or approaches that can be considered theories. Remember, there's a thing called music theory. They're not scientific hypotheses, but there is a topic, a subject that people study and get PhDs in that has to do with how music works or has worked. Although, why you would call that a theory if it has no predictive power, maybe that's where you demarcate a science.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how you bring that up, because that's kind of different from the scientific usage of the word, but it's also kind of different from the colloquial usage of the word. So I like how you brought that up.
It's almost like you could say theory is also an academic explanatory framework in which you describe an art or a topic or something. There are things about music, at least in our culture, that recur because when somebody's playing a blues song, you kind of know when it sounds right and when it sounds wrong. Or if even like an old-fashioned church hymn that has the Bach style choruses and stuff in it, chorales or whatever, when they're off a bit. And that has to do with music theory, or it describes what a particular rock artist did to make their guitar riff just totally, amazing.
Well, there's actually there's a mathematical theory of music and chords and how chords are created and stuff. And it's pretty intense. Right. I found a book on it about 20 years ago, and I haven't been able to find that book again.
Are you ready to give Danny a link?
No, I'm not. No.
So we'll wait a while. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, oh, sorry.
So he just declares here, since evolutionary biology is just natural history. No, it isn't. Evolutionary biology is a massive theory of that is a collection of so many hypotheses that there's no way that we could write them down in one place, and they're changing all the time. They are being refined and redeveloped, and we learn more and more about it. So I don't know what his complaint is.
Well, I mean, if he's talking about like natural history in terms of how this got to be the way it is, I guess I would agree with that. That's kind of the central premise of evolution, isn't it? But like, I don't kind of see what his problem is with it.
Yeah, what is it? Ex ante specifiable predictions that basically.
Yeah, he used that, and I'm not quite sure what that means, to be honest.
It's kind of I think it's like I think it's about statistics, kind of.
Hey, Danny, here's a question. Have you invited Jerry Coyne to talk with you about evolutionary theory and whether it should be just natural history?
He should.
I think
that would be an interesting get. I would stop everything to watch that kind of interview.
So so something to ask Danny is exactly what prediction would you expect evolution to make? What exactly are you asking of evolution to predict? Okay, I'd like to know that, because what you can predict is you can, given all the controls, all other things being equal, ceteris paribus, right? Given a controlled situation, you can make predictions about what an allele will do in a population over a number of generations. And in order to do that in real time, in real populations, almost impossible, right? But to do it in models, not a problem. We can model it. And from those models, we can compare them with things we see in populations, given certain ecological problems, and we can, in general, make predictions, but certainly not accurate. Here's how many grasshoppers there will be predictions, right? Just like you can't predict the weather, you can't predict your yield in a chemical experiment exactly. I mean, it's it's requesting a little too much, and I think that's kind of what he was getting at. And he's kind of, it almost seems like he's saying that it's not a theory if you can't do this. Well, what is it that you would want us to do, Danny? What exactly do you want us to predict? Is kind of what I'd like to get out of him. But I'll send him an invite and I'll back out. But if he's in any way disrespectful, he's getting booted immediately. I can guarantee you that. What is this?
Hey, Scott, I don't know if you saw it. You know who's going to have a great, well, I don't know if you call it a debate or what, but it's Graham Oppie and what's the guy's name that Danny interviewed? Bernard Cass. How do you pronounce his last name? Kastruff? You remember, Scott? What's his name?
I do not remember.
Bernard.
I said, I don't remember, but tell me more.
Yeah, those two. It's Graham Oppie and Bernard. I can't remember how you pronounce his name. It's Danny interviewed him. He's what he's got actually 2 degrees. But anyway, that's going to be a great. It's on Digital Gnosis channel. It's not till like December, I believe.
Okay.
But he's got it posted, so it's a ways off still. But I think that will be something people should look for. It's going to be I bet it's going to be a great. I don't know if he's calling it. It's probably more like a discussion type thing, But that'll be a good one for people to watch for.
So I have a question, Danny. Why were you talking about child pornography laws?
When?
In chat, you said CP laws, and if I Google, yeah.
I meant Caterus paribus. Or there's another pronunciation. What's the other pronunciation?
It's ceteris paribus.
I've heard
That's
both.
how you pronounce it. Yeah, you probably have. But
can you
almost everyone you look at will tell you it's ceteris. Anyway, okay, go ahead. You two talk.
What's up,
Can you
Andrew?
take the comment down first?
What's up, Andrew?
Hello.
Hi. So the idea, Andrew, is that there are certain explanations, broad explanations that we have that are not considered scientific explanations, right? Historical explanations, explanations about sociological and like sociological explanations. And some people, most people are not going to count those as sort of scientific explanations, right? And so there's a big question as to why, what distinguishes a broad scientific explanation from a non-scientific explanation. And this is I'm basically asking you to solve one of the biggest problems in philosophy of science, the demarcation problem. Right. And so there are a lot of responses, right? And there are a lot of intelligent people on all sides of the issue. But one of the ways that I approach the issue is that if we're starting with that history is not science, right? That when we're wondering what happened, although natural laws do factor into that, right? What explains why Napoleon invaded Russia rather than not, right? I don't think we're going to count that as a scientific explanation. Now, you might want to count that as a scientific explanation, right? In which case I have to, then we're really starting from the fundamentals here, right? But if we're kind of starting with explaining our theory about why World War II happened or why World War I happened, right? If we're saying that's a non-scientific sense of theory or explanation, maybe we should think about why and see the sort of traits that we're looking for in a scientific theory or broad explanation.
Right. Well, I think the difference between, say, evolutionary theory and the theories that you bring up about why Napoleon invaded, what was it again? Russia, or why world wars happened, or things like that. I think the difference is that those involve people, for example, But I think that scientific theories, at least in a broad sense, involve continuous testing against the natural world. And I don't think you can test against the natural world involving something like, well, I mean, I guess you can, like, certain aspects of what happened that caused the gunpowder to go off in a certain way, and it left this
Right, yeah.
imprint when Napoleon invaded Europe or Russia. Sorry.
Or you know what happened also is that when he invaded Russia, he got crapped on by the Russian winter, right? And that's a kind of natural history, right? That there was a big winter storm that wiped out the French army, or at least debilitated it, right? And so, but yet we're not going to count that as some kind of broad scientific explanation. So there's a conundrum, but I think that you took a very important step, right? And this is usually what most people say, that when we're talking about history, we're like in the sense of like Napoleon or world wars, we're factoring intentions, right? And it's interesting that you talk, I know you're probably not a dualist, but you talk like a dualist, right? That when we're talking about natural history, right, we're factoring out intentional explanations, right? Because they don't count as natural. So regardless of that point, pretend dualism is false. It doesn't matter, right? I agree with you, right? That when we're talking about intentional explanations, we're seen to be not talking about nature. And then what that also does is that takes psychology, right? That makes your view about psychology not scientific, even though psychologists implement almost the exact same methodology that physicists and chemists and even some certain biologists make, right? So that's to say that you can't construe science in terms of methodology, because it could be that historians, psychologists, sociologists implement the same kind of methodology as scientists in these various chemistry and biological fields.
Well,
look, this is a big problem, because this is basically what I'm asking you is a demarcation problem, right? But I think that I don't mean to repeat myself, so you can go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, I guess my thoughts on this are that, like, you can have a historical event and different aspects. I think it's a mistake to call it black and white and say, okay, this event is within the realm of scientific inquiry and this event is not. I think that aspects of different events, for example, I mean, even different kinds of questions, it really depends on whether it's scientific or not. For example, I would grant that if you were to say, why is in ultimate beyond reality kind of causes, metaphysical causes, why does evolution happen? I don't think evolution or evolutionary theory or science is really equipped to answer those kinds of questions. So I really think it depends on the questions you're answering and what you're exactly looking for, if that makes sense.
Well, let me give you one thought here that might help. Okay. So far as we know, there is no lump of gold with a diameter of 3 miles or 3 kilometers, right?
Correct.
And is that by physical necessity? No, right? There could have been, right, a lump of gold with a diameter of 3 kilometers. That's physically possible. Now, could there be a lump of uranium with a diameter of 3 kilometers? No. Right? Because there are laws, right, that constrain it. So I think part of what science is doing, right, is trying to get to how the world must be, necessity. Okay? The idea of history, at least let's test this against the Napoleon explanation and World War II and all of that didn't have to occur out of necessity, right? Napoleon could have decided not to invade Russia. World War II didn't have to happen, right? There were no laws dictating the outcomes. That whether Napoleon invaded Russia or not, right, wasn't out of necessity. It's all contingent accidents. Okay? So part, I think, of scientific inquiry is trying to get as best as they can to how must the world be by and in kind of what is the world like in terms of necessity? Okay, and so go ahead.
I think I would vaguely agree with that, but my issue with that is I guess scientists generally make that start from that axiom. Okay, we can actually gain knowledge about the world around us, but I don't think they make the axiom that that is ever a complete process. That is that we actually figure out how the world must be. Um, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my take on it.
Well, I have a question, right? Suppose I tell you this story. I tell you a story about how I planted a tree, okay? And
Okay.
it grew, it got infected by a fungus, and it died. Okay? The thing is that you can understand that event in terms of, in principle, laws, right? And they might end up becoming laws about physics or chemistry or even certain biochemical molecules. Macromolecules or whatever, like DNA and stuff like that. But the idea, though, is just the event itself. When I'm presenting this to you, like when I tell you the story about the line of causation, that I planted a tree was planted, it grew from a seed, and there was some DNA genes, right, that explained that, and then eventually you had a fungus infecting the trunk, and it caused an opening, and then more parasites entered the. I'm telling you a whole picture, and I think that the thing is that, did this have to happen? Right? Not forget about my intentional thing. That the idea is that from the moment that after the moment in which the tree was planted, right? Did it have to be infected by a fungus? Did all these things happen necessarily? And most people are going to say no. Right?
So just to clarify something, when you say intentional explanation, you're referring to something
what I want.
Right, like something that can be wanted, something that may or may not actually happen, whereas the other kind of explanation in terms of constraints and this must happen kind of thing.
Well, there are things that are contingently the case that are not intentional. For instance, like the lump of it so happens that every lump of gold that on Earth is less than 3 kilometers in diameter, but there's not physically. That's contingently the case, right? Meaning that there could have been a world in which the laws of physics are the same, that all the same laws of nature rather, and then there are lumps of gold with a diameter of 3 kilometers, right? So what I'm trying to say is that what certain kind of natural events, like the case of where my tree died because of a parasite or a fungus, right, has something in common with the lump of gold example, in that they're contingently the case, right? It didn't have to happen that way, right? But when you invoke laws of nature, that expresses necessity, because what laws of nature do is they ground counterfactuals, meaning that the world, if that law were not in place, then you would expect to see changes necessarily, or something like that. That's a counterfactual. Is that if it were otherwise?
Yeah, and that's kind of where I take issue again, because I don't think science is trying to figure out the kind of laws that you're speaking of.
It's science, not seance.
Yeah. So you don't think that scientists are in the business of finding facts that kind of govern our natural world? And that word govern, right? I mean laws, right? I mean theories and laws. There's a big debate about the relationship, but a lot of people think that theories are parasitic on laws, that without laws of nature, you would have no theories of scientific theories.
I think. Okay, re-ask your question one more time.
I guess I kind of forgot what did I say, guys? I must be that boring. I forgot what I'm saying.
Wow, that's a problem, Danny.
Yeah, I lost track. So I guess going back, if a scientist is in the business of understanding what governs the natural kinds, right? Natural kinds like atoms, organisms, right? These are natural kinds, arguably, right? Then if they're in the business of doing that, then they're in the business of understanding what laws are and what necessity is, right? And I'm saying that if you're the sort of scientist that says, look, I'm the sort of scientist that investigates the history of such entities that are governed by laws, then that's a kind of history. And I think I want to distinguish what those scientists are doing from what the chemists and maybe the molecular biologist and the physicists are doing, right? That when we ask, why is it that humans evolved 5 fingers instead of 6 fingers, it seems like if we had take the counterfactual, if we evolved 6 fingers, it wouldn't violate a law of nature. It seems like it's a contingent thing.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about that.
It's hard. It's not. This is not easy, right? And
Right.
to treat it, like to have a simplistic view about or attitude towards this, you're going to get into problems, right?
Okay, 5 fingers versus 6 fingers. Yes, the contingent things are going to have a place, right, in the theory, and they do. And we talk about this all the time about why there were 5 fingers instead of 6.
So
fingers,
you dispute
right?
that theories are parasitic on laws?
What's that?
You dispute that theories are parasitic on laws?
I don't know what that means.
Meaning that to have a notion of scientific theory, there must be laws of nature, because theories have the property being universal to some extent, even if you give some kind of ceteris paribus or ceteris, however you pronounce it, clauses, right? The idea there is that you must need laws of nature to have theories. And if you're saying that what the kind of contingent truths are kind of predicted on laws or theories, right? Then you have a problem, because then suddenly your theory or law is not expressing necessity anymore.
Okay, the law involved is.
So Steve, can I ask a question real quick?
Go ahead.
So Danny, when a theory changes or is modified, for example, does that mean that the laws that underlie them are themselves changed?
That's a good question. I don't know if I'm prepared to answer that question. Let me see what turns on it. So the idea is that there are some people that think that what a theory requires is not just one natural law. We want to distinguish theories and natural laws, okay? Most people think that theories encompass multiple, if not many, unknown natural laws, right? So if we get our theories wrong, right, I think that might imply that the way that we understand the regularity of the natural world is actually different than what we expected to be. And so, yeah, I think that it might not, given that there's a whole set of natural laws that a theory can encompass, it might just be that that one particular part was wrong, but the rest of it was fine. Because theories are broad in the sense that a theory is not a parasitic on one law, but a set of laws.
Right. Well, because I think that science is more in the business, and like you said, it is hard to differentiate. But I think science is more in the business of determining what I think would more be called natural laws or patterns of the world, rather than laws as in here is why things are the way they are.
Oh, well, I think those are interchangeable, right? That what laws do is dictate strict regularities, right? And there's such thing as probabilistic laws, but those really emerge in physics, not really in biology.
Okay, so let me give you an example. For example, say you were a blind man, and okay, or never mind, not say you are a blind man. Sorry. Say you are a person with some mental disorder or things like that, and you have senses, but you're discovering a world around you, some deeper reality, and what you're trying to do is to find patterns in that world by assuming from the starting point that there is a deeper reality, but not necessarily assuming that you will ever reach it. Saying, for example, trying to figure out the world around you as you understand it, but you can ask, for example, okay, what if I have a mental disorder and there is an even deeper reality going on there? Well, science kind of just starts with the first part, that saying that at some broad level there is something that can be discovered, and if we put some effort into it and we observe the world around us, say the mental person trying to observe everything around them, they're going to discover that part which can be discovered, not necessarily the deeper reality they assume is actually there.
Yeah, I think you're just giving a realist position about science, right? There's a philosophical debate about when scientists come to a conclusion, let's say we can even call it a true conclusion, right? Are they discovering a feature about the actual world, or is it something just kind of instrumental, right? And so there's a debate. About 30% of philosophers think the answer is that what scientific theories and laws are, even though we can say that they're true, is that they're in the end instrumental to our pragmatic aims, right? Whereas 70% of philosophers think that what you're saying is that we're actually discovering actual things about the reality, that if we were to come to a true conclusion of true scientific theory or law, right, we're actually talking about reality itself, right? But I think that's tangential. The thing is that scientific realists and anti-realists can agree, though, on what science is in the first place, right? They might just disagree about whether it's tracking something real or not. So you're bringing up I think you're bringing the anti-realism, realism debate with respect to science. What is science really getting at? Is it getting at facts about reality, or is it just suiting our pragmatic aims? That's a separate question from the question of what makes a scientific theory or a law, because an anti-realist and a realist can agree on on the necessary and sufficient conditions for what a scientific theory.
Where if we're just talking about theories and laws, then I can give my definition on it if you'd like.
Of course, yeah.
Right. So the way I understand it is that a scientific theory is this broad overall idea, and I'm going to use an example after I define this just to make it clearer. Mm-hmm. This overarching idea about the natural world that explains many disparate observations and is continuously tested against the hypotheses that make it up. So all those hypotheses, each time they're tested, if they support the same overall idea, they are supporting the theory. So, for example, you can test why are there different plant and animal fossils around the world. You can also test why do earthquakes happen, for example. And you can connect those ideas under this larger idea that we call the theory of plate tectonics. So that's my view personally of what theories are in science. And I think that's generally the view that I've found based on the research I've done and the people I've talked to in the field.
Yeah, then I think that commits you to thinking that what some call the special sciences and even history, that they're doing science as well. And it seems like to you, based on how you're describing laws and theories and such, is that it's about methodology, right? Not about necessity.
Right, I would agree with that.
Yeah, but then you see, like, I want to say that if I wanted to conduct a study of whether speed is dishonest, and I test things and I create a theory for my I predict things, I gather my data, I don't want to say I'm doing
really speed.
What? I'm just sending a cautionary note.
Yeah, I want to say that I'm not doing science when I'm making those predictions, gathering my data, and all of that. There's no necessity with respect to speed's behavior, right? There are no laws of speeds.
Speed.
2 strikes. Use another example.
You're very
Use an interesting example. In the uranium and gold thing, really? Come on, stop it. Do
you don't
better.
Get that example? It's very simple.
No, I get that example. It's just that it's been done so many times. It makes me want to gag. So
do you disagree with it? Like, are you just
use examples from the field we're talking about evolution? If you want to talk about what predictions evolution should make as a theory, then specify a prediction that evolution should make it a theory.
That's not my job.
Your thing about the fungus and the tree, no, that was getting close to the to the subject.
Look,
right?
Look, you're just missing the point. When I gave the lump of uranium and the lump of gold example, that was
I
just a contrast.
This is why
you're not a serious interlocutor, right?
I don't care about something that has been discussed in every little junior high philosophy article over the last 50 years. Okay, use an example from the field. We're talking about evolution, so use examples. The tree fungus thing was a little better. So that's all.
Can I maybe propose an example with him, Speed?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Would that be okay, Danny?
Of course. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is going to be a phylogenetic example, obviously, because that's my whole shebang. But basically, what you're talking about is natural history, for example, and I would take that to mean that if we see a certain virus or bacterium causing an outbreak in the world today, and we can explain that using evolution, in this case, phylogenetic comparison, to deduce or to figure out when and how that virus originated and how it acquired the traits that it did through phylogenetic history. That would basically be the kind of thing we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I take that to be natural history.
Right.
I think Speed doesn't want to say that, though, for some reason.
Right. Well, because to me, then, it's natural history seems to be a means to an end, to kind of explain what we do see today.
There's nothing wrong with that. Right.
Right.
There's a reason why Joe Biden is president, right? We have a good set of explanations for why that occurred, all starting from, the 1400s, right? Even before, right? Like, we could go all the way back, right, to the beginnings of human civilization, and to get all the way to the thorough explanation of how Joe Biden became president. Okay. The point, that is history, and none of that is necessary, right? And so what natural history is, to me, is that instead of talking about intentional beings and and the way that they interact with the world, we're talking about natural kinds and the way that they interact with the world in some kind of contingent fashion, not no necessity.
So it seems that you're kind of implying a distinction between, what creationists often call historical and observational science, right?
Yeah, I think that there's something true about that, but I don't know. I'm not familiar with the exact way they make that distinction. But the point is that when I told you the story of how my tree died, right? That's a historical fact about natural kinds: trees, funguses, viruses, soil, right? Those are all natural things, right? And the fact is that didn't have to happen. There weren't any laws about those sorts of kinds that necessitated that happening in my backyard.
Right.
Well, there's nothing wrong with natural history, right? I think that, though, when we talk about when people are trying to get at the laws of nature, I think, to me, that's the strict sense of science that I'm talking about. We're not talking about history and what has happened. We're generating propositions about the natural world and its regularities in a way where we can actually make predictions deductively, right? By the meanings of the propositions that form the theory and the laws, can we specify what's going to happen in the future?
Okay, so how about this? Say if you're talking about yourself or anyone for that matter in the past doing an experiment with sodium chloride and zinc or any other two chemicals you want to think about when they undergo a certain reaction, you write that down. Basically, like that would seem to be kind of both intentional and or this kind of natural history and kind of scientific perspective from where you're going at, right?
Sorry, what was the question? I missed the question.
Yeah, sorry, I phrased that really bad.
No, I mean, my bad.
Yeah, so if you or someone else is doing this, just for sake of argument, chemical reaction kind of experiment in the past,
Okay.
and you're monitoring your results and writing them down, for example, that seems to incorporate both what you're saying of natural history and something
methodology,
right?
A scientific methodology, right? Historians, psychologists, sociologists, physicists, right? They all may implement the same kind of scientific method or methodology, right? Now, the thing is that we don't want to say that if you implement that methodology, therefore you're doing science. Given my example with speed, right? I can implement the scientific method to test whether speed is understanding an argument, right? Or whether he will understand an argument, right?
Speed.
Oh boy, is that strike three?
What happened?
Cool. That was strike three. Yeah.
There are people in the chat saying you're a snowflake.
Yeah, I am.
Oh,
Yeah, pretty
one
crabby
did.
today.
One did, yeah.
Find better examples, Danny.
You're so sensitive. You're like.
Anyway, so let's see. So one of the comments
We're
that
just
he
going
made
to change
here,
topics now?
what's that?
Or what's going on? Are we just kicking Danny out?
He's just in timeout for a while. I'm going to just put him in the corner for a while so he can think about his evil ways. What did he say here? Okay, so he says the predictions made in evolutionary biology don't come from any theories or laws in evolutionary biology. Therefore, evolutionary biology isn't science, it's just natural history. So how do you feel about that comment? I mean, that kind of misses the whole fucking point, right?
Well, just to get into this, can you highlight Dessel's second to last comment? I think the one about
I got a cat in the way. Okay, there you go.
Oh, sorry, the one before that, maybe. It was something about historical observational science again.
Let's see. Okay, right here.
Because I read that and I want him to clarify on that if possible. Dessel, if you can.
I thought I sent him a link.
Oh, yeah, I think Dessel, we ought to get Dessel in here to give his criticism of that distinction, if he's willing to come in.
I just sent you a link, Dessel. So
okay, thanks, Speed. Yeah, because I want to make sure I understand what he meant by that.
It's wrong. Observational versus historical. Okay, as a really good example, one of the things that I've been looking into for I think the last month or two is the evolution of the liver, right?
Right.
And so anyway, the theory of evolution combined with a lot of work from molecular biology, anatomy, and a number of other things gives me enough to start to sketch together a possible natural history of the liver, right? How it came to be. Now, the idea is not to know exactly how the liver came to be or to predict what the liver is going to do in the future. That's not what we're doing, right? We're trying to come up with plausible causal mechanism for the liver to have evolved over time, from in
right, like just come up with explanations.
Yeah, and from that you can make very interesting predictions about liver function and liver diseases and things like that based on just what you know about that evolutionary path. Now, the interesting thing about
I think I generally agree with that, like the explanation versus the why and how it will happen, stuff like that. I think that's a good way of putting it.
So would we call that, it's just natural history? It's not a scientific theory. It's not science. I mean, would you think that wasn't science? Would you
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds to me like science, because
Yeah.
we're looking at the liver, and the thing about the liver as it developed, one of the things that I'm finding out is that it kept adding functions along the way. And it's really interesting how it added functions. And from those additional functions, you can see all the places where it actually worked to cause the problem of cirrhosis of the liver.
Right.
Cirrhosis of the liver is caused by a function.
Right. I think the question is not why did it come, or how/why did it come to be the way it is now.
Not exactly.
Not exactly. I think the question we're asking is, how can we best explain what we are seeing now, in terms of either how can we explain that by historical mechanisms or modern day mechanisms or things like that. But anyways, Dessel's here. Hey, Dessel.
Yeah.
Howdy.
So what are your thoughts on this?
So my thoughts are that I think that the way that Danny is construing science here, his demarcation criterion is way too restrictive in terms of referring to laws. And when he's making that observational historical distinction, I also think that ends up obliterating a ton of what we would consider to be genuine science. When you were talking about history, before, Danny, you gave the example of like trying to understand things by presenting like questions of intention, like why did Napoleon invade Russia? But at the same time, there is the historical question of, did Napoleon invade Russia, or did Caesar cross the Rubicon? And that's history just as well. And if you were to draw this distinction of observational versus historical and be strict about it, then you have to throw things like paleontology right out the window. And there's no law involved in reconstructing like the natural history of morphological development over time, morphological change over time, I should say. So if you're going to ask me about how I would demarcate science from other fields of study, I don't think that you can come up with a strict demarcation criterion. I think it's very blurry. I think fundamentally what science is just taking the two primary ways in which we can know things, which is through our senses and through our rationality. Those two epistemic methods, and applying them to a rigorous enough extent. And rigorous enough is blurry. And that's as best as you're going to be able to do. If you try to go this purely deductive, nomological kind of way, you're going to end up throwing out a lot of good science. If you try to go a falsificationist route or any of these other like very popular proposals, you end up throwing out legitimate science, a ton of legitimate science. I did a video a while back on falsificationism, and there was this paper, Why Falsificationism is False, that was published in the early 2000s. And what it did was it went through a recent edition of the journal Nature, and it took 70 articles that were published that year, and it went down the line to see whether or not it could accommodate those articles to a falsificationist kind of setup. And it found that literally only 2 of the articles met the criterion for falsificationism. And I think the exact same thing would apply here when you're insisting that laws and necessity are basically all that define what science is, and anything that doesn't meet that criterion is not science.
Yeah. So for the same considerations that you think that my construal of science is myopic, I'm scared that you're watering down science to where if I'm investigating whether speed is dishonest, and that becomes science.
Yeah. So I think that if you are applying like these kinds of methodologies that you're talking about, you're gathering data, you're checking to see whether or not like dishonesty can be proven in particular circumstances, engaging whether or not honesty can be demonstrated in other circumstances. I would say that you're applying scientific methodology to the question. I don't think that, like, for example, when you were throwing out history into the trash bin as in terms of not being science, but we call that social science. Same thing with sociology and psychology. They can be good or bad science to varying extents. Like, I'm pretty critical of modern day psychology. I don't like a lot of the stuff that they've come up with. I'm really critical of old psychology too. I think a lot of that is just bad science. But nevertheless, if you're applying those kinds of methodologies, you are participating in science. It's just that the quality of your science will be better or worse depending on how you're going about it. I don't have a problem with the idea of, like, posing a particular question about a person and then saying, well, I'm going to try to assess this hypothesis about this person in a rigorous scientific manner. And yeah, so like I wouldn't really have a problem with that. And I don't think you could say that it waters it down. Like, I would just say that, like, how do I want to phrase it?
So can I maybe add something to what you said, Dessel?
Okay.
So I think something you've hit home at is, to me at least, I don't think this is it historical, is it observational kind of distinction is I mean, I guess at broad extremes it is applicable. Like, obviously paleontology is historical, and some aspects of physics today are observational. But I think what you're saying, I think it also depends on the question you're asking, and in particular, how certain, quote unquote, using that loosely, how certain your science or conclusions can be. For example, I once talked to a professor about this, and he used the example of there are some things which you can be more certain about than others, and that doesn't always correspond to how far back it goes into the past. For example, like, you can be more certain about how a particular chemical reaction occurs, or just to use a more daily life example, you can be more certain about what you're going to do tomorrow than what you're going to do 6 years from now.
Yeah, that works both ways. It goes into the future and into the past, and the further you get from the present, the less, the more contingency you're going to have. But when you look at what we do with paleontology, basically, yeah, it's history, but it isn't just a story. We can look at paleontology and we can make inferences that tell us what is going on in the current organisms that we have, right?
Right. Well, that's
like with the liver. If we can tell where it's from, and we can see where the function was laid in, we can make some sort of sense of cirrhosis of the liver, basically.
Right. Well, I think that's another good point, is that the same theory, even the same experiment, even can have both historical and observational aspects or information gleaned from it. So does that mean that we need to get rid of the information that we gather as historical? Well, I don't think so, because that would be getting rid of a lot of information, as you're saying, Dessel.
Yeah, that's really important. Paleontology is really important for us figuring out what is going on with extant species. So, I mean, it's just a massive body of laws. And the thing about laws, I think laws are pretty much physics. You kind of leave the solid, crystal clear law when you leave physics, because you can do more precise experiments with physics than you're ever going to do with chemistry or biology or anything. And
yeah, the whole thing about laws, like, Danny was asking, are scientists in the business of, basically discovering laws? And I think, yes, they are, but they're not just in the business of doing that. Science is
Right.
much more expansive than that. And that kind of ties into, like, Danny would then accuse all of us here of watering down science.
Yeah,
but
so
I
who
think that,
cares?
well, but I think that the thing is that if your philosophy of science is able to accommodate those things that we can all have high confidence and agree on as being legitimate scientific fields of study, and also can explain why we should get rid of the things that we can all agree on are not legitimate, like, we would get rid of things like astrology or
Right.
or alchemy or things like that, and explain why. I think that would be a much more suitable philosophy of science, a much
Right.
more plausible
Yeah,
account of
because
science.
it's more like a spectrum where on one side you have obviously pseudoscientific ideas, and on the other side you have obviously scientific ones, but in between, it kind of depends where you draw the line, as you're saying here.
Yeah, and I just have to reiterate that I do think that it's ultimately to try to demarcate science from non-science in some kind of like strict, direct, simple proposition or singular statement kind of way. I think that that's going to end up being a failure.
Right.
Again, because I think it's ultimately you get science as a matter of degree. Um,
Right.
you're taking the means that you have to know things, your capacity to engage in rational thought and sensory observation or your sensory apparatuses, and you're applying them to a certain rigorous extent. And that would be my definition of science, which is, like I say, I mean, it's kind of blurry, it's slightly ambiguous, because how much rigor do you need before you're really getting into science? And that's kind of an
Right.
open question that you would have to examine on a case by case basis.
Yeah, I think that I'm fine with saying paleontology is natural history and not science, but I think that colloquially we equivocate
What?
on the word
We, we,
science, right?
we just argued that it was part of
Yeah, but
science.
I'm about to give you why it's not, why I don't think you can say it. Otherwise, you're going to end up contradicting yourself, right? The point is that if you define science in terms of its methodology, right, the way that you come to the conclusions either via the senses or whatever, right, then there's going to be too many reductio ad absurdums where all sorts of things are going to become science, and I'm going to end up contradicting myself, right?
So, can you give an example?
Yeah, I gave you, if I wanted to study speed psychology and his dishonesty, right? Then that's going to require.
Oh, fuck you! You're out
So,
of here, you asshole.
but again, I
I've
mean, like,
given you 5 fucking strikes already, and you're
so
out.
it's my thing though is just like, I mean, what you're engaging in there though would be psychology, which would be a social science. I mean, we consider psychology today to be a social science. You go to college, you go to high school, and what's involved in the social sciences courses that you take? Things like history, psychology, sociology. These are social sciences that are usually contrasted with the hard sciences like physics. So if you're suggesting that this is a reductio ad absurdum, I don't see how, because what you're participating there is a psychological study of a particular person. So that's already commonly viewed as science, as a social science, as you go through the course curriculum at school. So I don't really see. I mean, like, you're claiming that this is a reductio, but I don't see why.
I really think that the disagreement here is centered around what kinds of observations we're looking at, and instead of what we should be asking, which is how do we test our conception of how we can organize these observations. So I think that really comes down to an idea of testability, not is this yeah.
My question is, what problem are we trying to solve here?
I mean, what it's been so far is the demarcation problem, how to differentiate science from non-science. In my
And what
personal
is
opinion,
okay?
all of the previous attempts that I've seen to give a strict demarcation criterion have failed. And the reason why is the reason that everybody else here keeps agreeing on, is that when you try to apply these strict criterion, you end up throwing out all sorts of stuff that we would all want to keep as good science.
Right.
Well,
So
that's. Oh, sorry. Go
What's
ahead.
the problem? Like exactly what problem are we trying to solve?
Well, because Danny's applying the demarcation problem and trying to say that evolutionary biology, for example, is not science; it's natural history.
Yeah, and why would anybody say that evolution is not science when it has yielded so much information for it? I mean, so many results. I mean, that's basically what the hell is it? It's like waving a red flag for a bull. I mean, what is the point of doing that? What is the point of that criticism?
Well, calling it natural history doesn't mean. Why can't it be both? It's natural history. Obviously, it's something we observe that is in the history of things scientific, I guess.
Right.
And then there's the scientific method.
You got to be careful with the phrase natural history, because that normally means that what we know about an animal, like a particular animal's life and how it mates and what it does. So that's really kind of a bad phrase. That's more about what is going on right now than history. Okay, we're talking about, what the hell would you call it? Evolutionary history, or the history of species, or whatever. But
it sounds like it's becoming more of a semantic issue than anything else. It's just it's the words that we use to define something or to describe something. I mean, I thought it was weird. The reason I came in here is because what Danny said before you kicked him, he said something about relying on your. It was the possible contradiction of relying on your own senses when you're doing science. Getting into absurdity. Something to that. Yeah, I have to go back and listen to that again, but it was just a weird, like, we're talking about observations, so that's literally implied that we're using our senses.
Yeah, and of course that's a really naive way to look at it. That we're using. I mean, I'm using my senses to look at through the eyepiece of my microscope, right? So
yeah. But I mean, it starts. I mean, if you didn't have your senses, you wouldn't be making any observations. So that's why it's weird to me.
What if we just took all the philosophers and put them on a rocket ship and sent them to another planet?
You'd still have philosophy.
God damn it!
That's a totally that's another issue that I could go on with for a really long time, because I hear a lot of people say
you just have to eliminate all humans.
Yeah, it's just I see a lot of people who are heavily engaged in philosophy bring a lot of bad ideas to the table, but I also see a lot of the people who talk critically about philosophy also bringing a lot of bad philosophical ideas to the table. So it's just like, for me, I would just say that it would be a matter of trying to get good philosophy versus bad philosophy, instead of just shunting all philosophy in as being qualitatively bad.
A really interesting discussion would be, okay, the contents of a theory. I mean, if you thought about taking a theory like theory of evolution, and you thought about writing it out, right? Like listing all of the propositions and the set of all propositions that go into the theory of evolution. What the hell would that look like? And what is a theory exactly? What are we meaning by a theory? Are we meaning this big bag of
for the overall overarching idea, you could list out a set of key propositions, or say, for example, evolution, descent with modification, common ancestry, things like that. But you couldn't really go much deeper than that, because it gets case specific really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a massive body of literature if you wrote it all out. And we're kind of collectively calling that the theory of evolution. But when we say theory of evolution, we're sort of nodding at something. We're not really specifying something in like absolute clarity. We're sort of nodding at a monster set of propositions.
Yeah, be careful when talking to a philosopher and using that word absolute, Speed.
Did I say absolute? I didn't say absolute. What did I say? What did I say? What did I
He said
say?
absolute. He said absolute, like absolute certainty or something like that. So yeah, be careful with that word absolute.
Don't worry.
No, I hate that word.
We Sith philosophers deal in absolutes. You don't have to worry too much.
No, I don't. Basically, I don't believe in absolutes. I think absolute is a religious idea. Certainty and absolutes are basically religious mythical ideas entirely.
Yeah,
I don't believe in any of them.
I'm not going to go down that road because then we're going to get pedantic about how are you defining absolute? And I'm just not even going to bother with that.
How do you define
absolutely
truth?
defining it as
Yeah, there's a really good video.
That absolute is this,
There's a really good video from Ozymandias from years ago about where he talks about certainty.
Yeah, I know. I heard that. Yeah, I listened.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. He's like, does it really matter?
So, random nitpick for Dessel here from earlier. So I don't know how familiar you are, Dessel, with the cladistic look at determining common ancestors.
You're going after my joke comment about Richard Dawkins producing a genetic analysis that showed that speed was the first universal common ancestor.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you're gonna get me booted there, Andrew.
Yeah, to be fair, I got to boot you now. To be fair, because of course, I have to be fair. There's a law. There's a law, absolute law that means
at least you're being scientific about it, Speed.
I have to be scientific about it, right? And we have to have a law-like relationship.
Yeah, no problems with what you were saying there, Andrew. At least though, what I was trying to get at there, even though I typed it out wrong, was just they do though compare traits among various species, right? And that's how they work their way back. So I mean, like, I wanted to say a couple last things because Danny over here at 5:10 p.m. in the chat says, "Why wouldn't psychology be a hard science?" And I didn't want my argument to be contingent upon that hard-soft distinction. I was just drawing it as like, a distinction that people often make where physics would be like a hard science and psychology would be a soft science. And usually it's the soft science. Usually it's the social sciences that are thrown into the soft category. And it really comes down to, again, a kind of pedantic issue about how you're going to define hard and soft. Some people might define it in terms of like rigor, that physics is a much more rigorous field than psychology is, or something like that.
Yeah, more law-like.
Heard, and it could come down to a law-like distinction too, between like physics versus psychology. But ultimately, like, my argument wasn't really predicated on the hard-soft distinction. But what I do want to say, the most important thing here, because the last thing he says that I wanted to respond to, he was responding to Jay, and he says, because natural laws are not governing historical contingencies. And again, it's that insistence that science doesn't address historical contingencies. But I think it definitely does. Again, you took a look at that study in that paper that I referenced with those 70 Nature articles. Tons of them were dealing with matters that we would consider to be historical contingencies. Dealing with, just trying to figure out what certain genetic sequences were, what tropical fish will do during the winter time. Going through all this different stuff that has no real relation to like physical law. I like some of the examples that Just a Walking Fish gave earlier about like germ theory and stuff like that. Science is often concerned with just figuring out the way that things work, irrespective of whether or not there's some hard physical law that underlies it.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think a really good example is like the Chicxulub impact. Like, was that was kind of historical contingency, and we can figure that out nowadays. I don't know if Danny would consider that natural history, because like it's not entirely evolutionary biology, but it is pretty solid case from geology, at least from modern geological observations.
Dessel, did you see the comment on the screen from Nestlig? Did you get it?
So I would really like Nestlig to email me, because the last couple of comments that and I don't think he must have sent a comment on a YouTube page or something. But I don't know. But I would like Nestle to email me, and I'll try to see if I can send him my email, or maybe Speed, if you could send him my email, something. But I would like him to email me instead, because he often comments on my YouTube, or at least he has commented on my YouTube channel. But I take those videos down, so I end up losing his comments. But I definitely want any Nick Lane paper that Nestle comes across. I want them. And
okay, I just I'm sending you a joint email so you guys have each other.
Appreciate that. And okay, I see what you just said there under discussions. And what was the last thing that you just highlighted from Danny? What was it?
The thing about social sciences, like
okay. The point is that soft sciences is just a way of calling non-science science. And no, I don't agree with that at all. Again, paleontology is most definitely science, and yet that is a historical science. That's reconstructing the past,
Right.
and also and trying to make sense of the present by reference to that past. And I just, if your philosophy of science entails throwing paleontology out the window, then you have a bad philosophy of science.
So, Speed, do you mind if I shift gears and change us to another topic?
No, not at all. It'd be a good time.
So you and Rebecca were talking about morphological evolution the other day, right?
Right. I think.
I guess.
Yeah.
Well, how about this, Tesla? Do you have any thoughts on Evo Devo and morphological evolution in general?
I mean, can you pinpoint a particular issue in Evo Devo?
Well, kind of the thing that creationists kind of expect to see from us is what I've heard termed macro mutations, as in a specific mutation that leads to a large effect, and not many subsequent mutations that accumulate to add on to that. Whereas most people would recognize that much, maybe not all, but much of evolution has to do with accumulated mutations of small effect, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but there's I think I was trying to make the point that there are some mutations that could have a very large morphological effect, right? Like you could your example of the Hull tears on basically they pop up in more than one place. And I was trying to explain that, but in order for a new organ to develop, there almost has to be thousands of tests of a number of mutations in order to put that together, right? So it has to happen over a fairly long period of time. But still, it is conceivable that one little change in the Hox gene could modify a body plan extensively. And I think that's what we saw in Cambrian.
Right. I'm not disputing that those mutations can happen. I'm just saying it is kind of controversial as to how important they are for evolution.
So here's one thing to throw at you then, Andrew, in terms of this, because Nestle just mentioned Nick Lane. And I think it's in the Vital Question where Nick Lane talks about the endosymbiosis where we gain our mitochondria. He suggests that is more plausibly understood under the construal of a hopeful monster than it is under any kind of model based on selection. And so, he argues for basically like the resuscitation of the hopeful monster idea through endosymbiosis, where we gain our mitochondria. And if that's the case, you could argue that, in fact, the hopeful monster large mutation approach does, in fact, turn out to be really important because of just how important the gaining of mitochondria for eukaryotes was.
Right. Yeah. I think that would be fine in my view. I just
I'm kind of leery of it myself. Because I mean it's not.
Well,
I'm not really sure. Go ahead.
Just my position isn't that macro mutations aren't relevant whatsoever, or that they don't happen. I just think that they're always going to be, for the time being, at least based on our current information, they're always going to be less common or less kind of selectable than small scale changes that are non-lethal and don't. I hate to use this analogy because the creationists like to harp on this, but it's the only one I can think of at the moment. You have a machine or a computer, for example, and you take a macro mutation, say, and hit it with that, and it's most likely going to be lethal. And that kind of sort of principle is the one reason, at least, why I think that macro mutations may be still important for biological evolution, but they're certainly, yeah, go ahead.
With computers, if you make a micro change, 1 bit, change a 1 to a 0, your program crashes. So there's that. I was making that point the other day. But if you basically had a million tests where you could change a 1 to a 0, you may end up with a program that continued to run.
Right.
It would produce a different result, but it would continue to run if you had a lot of changes, right? And I think that as genomes become more specified as they go down, one branch or another, it becomes more difficult for minor changes to have a big effect, right? Because the genome is much more interdependent, that sort of thing. I think,
that's another thing to consider is how modular the change is.
I apologize for momentarily changing the subject back to Danny's topic, but there is one last thing he wrote in chat that I wanted to comment on, and then after that I'll shut up and we can let the conversation go into these next areas. But he says, if you're starting with the assumption that paleontology must be science, then it seems that you're just dogmatic, almost by definition. But when I asked him earlier about why he considers laws to be the full definition of science, the demarcation criterion, and I asked him what his rationale was for that, he responded back, "Oh, I apologize, it's analytic. It's definitional." And so, I mean, it seems as if, we end up almost at an impasse in the sense that for him, definitionally, it's a matter of law. So, I mean, doesn't that make him just as dogmatic as us? I would just say though, that if you want to look to the history of science to understand how it developed, where it came from, the way in which you'll see it developed was in terms of its methodologies, the very thing that Danny doesn't like.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Right. Developed for all its practicality.
Yep. So
yeah, boy.
Yeah.
That Scientific American article that I put the links to.
I couldn't read it. They wouldn't let me read it because I read too many for the month or something.
That may be true. I don't know if we can find it somewhere else, but yeah, it's pretty good because it actually outlines a different problem with natural history versus science as we conceive it now, which is well, just if you're interested, just take a look. It's a very thoughtful article written back in 2014, basically saying this person really loves knowing about animals and plants and environments, and doesn't want to spend, her life as a biologist staring in microscopes all day long, or just doing extracts from plants so that you can look at the DNA. That natural history is about. It's kind of like the 19th century conception of a naturalist versus maybe like a late 20th or 21st century version. And if it's true that biologists are less competent in the general knowledge about animals and how they interact and relate in the world, then she may have a good point. But it's worth reading that article to find out what we mean by natural history. It may be that Danny, let's say his point is like totally valid, maybe only using the word natural history because nobody else was using it because it's falling into disuse.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Something about Rebecca with basically it's just a story. You could say that, but saying it's just a story, like, okay, if there's a car that appears in my driveway.
Well, I mean, like all hypotheses are stories or explanations. What does that even mean?
Yeah, is it just a story for me to say that somebody drove it there? I mean, it could be that a helicopter landed it there. I mean, I could be wrong, but it's not just the story. It's a pretty reasonable thing to.
Well, I like how one person put in the chat it's just a story or it's just a proposition until you test it.
Yeah, but I mean, that's all we're ever going to get is stories about what happened in the past, and we're going to be able to. But who the hell cares exactly how it happened? As long as we know the broad strokes, and that's the important part.
Right.
That goes back to my example with the liver. What are we trying to do with science? We're not trying to predict the future. We're not trying to tell exactly what happened in the past. We're trying to get ourselves some tools so that we can make changes to things in our present to make our lives better. That's how we ended up with this internet thing, right? Oh, I gotta take a call, guys. You're on your own.
Oh no, the place is gonna go to shit now.
So
no, it's not, because look who's here. It's Randolph Richardson.
Hey, Randolph.
How you doing, sir? I see you got some pro-Canada stuff up there. Are you propagandizing?
Yeah, I've been playing around
with that Canadian propaganda in our USA.
But this is a good topic. This theory, the meaning of the word theory. So often people use it out of scientific context in debates.
Yes.
When they're talking about scientific claims, it's comes up a fair bit. It's just a theory.
I got to end at some point. Oh, I can't hear you guys.
You can't hear us. We can hear you.
I muted you. Anyway, I got a friend I need to talk to, so we're gonna have to shoot it in the head by 6 o'clock, guys. So
what they say: a friend in need is a friend who probably wants money.
It is a friend in need, actually.
That doesn't rhyme.
No, he doesn't want money. It's much more complicated than that.
Is that a scientific theory?
Yeah,
that's my scientific theory.
Yeah, I ran
off. Back in a minute. Someone's at the door here.
Boy, everybody's just they're just socially busy all of a sudden.
Yeah, we got lives other than this fucking YouTube stuff.
The only time I get out of my house is when the dog gets out of the fence.
But look at it this way, Speed. There's been no yelling today. There's been no over talking. There's been it's all been cordial and respectful.
Yeah, Danny just used some bad examples, so he needs to work on his example repertoire a little bit before he, and then he won't keep getting booted out. He's just got to be a good boy. He's not a good boy. If he's not a good boy, he gets booted, right?
I guess maybe a random thing to end off on. Has anyone, there was a study I read back in, or I didn't read it in 2016, but it was done in 2016, trying to explain why snakes have long torsos using certain regulatory genes. And one of the ones they found was this regulatory gene called OCT4. Has anyone heard anything about that?
Oh, that sounds like something worth Googling. OCT4?
Yeah, OCT4.
And snakes.
Snakes. Why did I have to be snake?
I recently got my hands on why the snake lost its leg and other, I think, curious tales from Evo Devo or whatever. It's something I want to dive into. Evo Devo, when I first stumbled across it, fascinated the hell out of me, but I got pulled off into other topics, and I really would like to return to it sometime soon. But there's a billion other topics that I would like to return to sometime soon, so I'm pretty swamped
I
now.
know,
Right?
isn't that a bitch?
Yeah, it is a bitch, but we'll take it
Is
day by
that
day.
book or a video?
It's a book.
Oh, cool. Who's it from?
Hey.
Let me look it up. I'll be right back. I'll look it up.
Okay, this is a, let's see, developmental cell. They're talking about the OCT4 GDF11. Author focuses
Yep, that's the one.
Two known regulators of trunk mesoderm. I'll link that in the chat.
Yeah. So,
And,
what I got from it is basically there was a heterochronic change in the OCT4 gene, and that caused the number of vertebrae along the torso to increase, thus lengthening the torso and giving the snake its long body.
And I think that's an example of something that can, a small change can basically have a fairly big effect.
Well, I don't know if they said it was a specific mutation. They just said differences in the genes.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure on that.
Be interesting to look into that.
The author of the book is L.I. Held Jr. Held, H-E-L-D.
What's the name of the book? What's the name of the book?
How the Snake Lost Its Legs, and Curious Tales from the Frontier of Evo Devo. And one more time, that's L.I. Held Jr.
Oh, the snake lost its legs.
I remember reading somewhere or seeing a video a long time ago that they're talking about the human spine is actually more ideally suited for being horizontal rather than vertical. Things hanging from it and where the rib cage works and all this kind of stuff. Does any of you know anything about this? I guess because I know quite a few of you are up on genetics and evolution and whatnot in the sciences.
I don't know specifically. It is not a claim that that I find off the cuff to be terribly implausible. I mean, given the fact that we evolved from knuckle walkers, right. And scientists constantly stress how evolution by natural selection works as a tinkerer, not as an engineer. So working with what it's already got to work with.
The tinkerer almost kind of implies some kind of intention as well, though, does it not?
So that's the thing, is that when people talk about natural selection, they often use terminology that sounds as if it involves intention. But the way that natural selection works is just the environment mimicking the way that an intentional agent would work. It's just like how Darwin specifically chose the term natural selection to compare it to the artificial selection of humans intentionally engineering certain traits into a population.
Right. Well, essentially, you can just think of it as non-random filtering of random variation.
Yep.
There's our book.
How the Snake Lost Its Legs. Curious Tales from the Frontier of Evo Devo.
I like how the title's been repeated 3 times already.
Oh, I didn't hear the other two.
By different people.
It's almost like we're advertising it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I get a commission. I get a commission from this guy. So,
quick, put a link in the chat.
When was it published?
It's already in the chat, Randolph.
That's getting repeated too. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll put it in there just one more time, just in case you guys missed it. Okay.
Make sure you put it in the description too. Oh, it's already there, right?
Oh, it's in the description. Oh, yeah. It's been there forever.
Lovely.
Anyway. Okay. I guess we got that figured out.
Cool.
Hey, Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Can we start the streaming now?
Huh? For what?
All right, gentlemen. I'm going to head out. Y'all have a good one.
You going out to delete some more videos on your channel?
I'm going to try to read a few more chapters out of this textbook. I really like Joan Silk. I think she's great. I think she's done some pretty awesome work on evolutionary altruism. And so I was interested to read her textbook on human evolution, and so that's what I'm going through right now.
I think.
All right, y'all. I gotta go. Catch y'all later.
Later.
Hi, Denzel.
I would like to get out of here too, but what else?
No, you can't get out of here, Speed. You're
Wait,
committed.
Wow, what is that happening, Randolph? What is happening with your? That is so cool.
He's losing genetic information.
No, your thing was like, I don't know. On StreamYard, it's like scintillating, but if I make you full screen, it doesn't. But if it's small,
the pixelation does that because there's partial transparency with the blue banner and with the white text on it, and so the algorithm they're using to shrink things down causes that effect, a bit of a sparkling effect when it's shrunk down a bit.
Well, it's pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah, actually, it does.
I have to ask, Pete, why are you looking at Randolph's thing?
I like looking at things.
That's how you notice patterns. That's how you do science.
As long as you don't put it under a microscope.
This is coming from the guy named Peter.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh boy.
By the way, Randolph, did you hear? I'm personally responsible for the most amount of strikes that Speed ever got on his channel.
Well, congratulations.
And all of them in one show.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
What did you do?
What did you do, Peter?
What did you
One day,
do, Peter?
Peter.
What did I do?
No, I think the real question is, what did he not do?
That's a good way to put it.
I tested it on my own channel, and it worked. I got strikes for every single one of them, but they're not dangerous strikes. They're just demonetization strikes. And I thought, well, Speed has such a shabby channel, not monetized, so I can take a risk.
Yeah.
Well, Oz was playing a stream last night, playing a whole bunch of music on there, and near the end, he started getting kicked off by YouTube constantly, more regularly for policy violations, and then eventually he kept on putting it back, and then finally, after about 5 or 6 times, the channel just went dead. It said, this video is no longer available. That was the end of his live stream. He was going for a good 3.5 hours before all this happened.
You know what I find to be coincidental is Peter just joined the stream, and now Otangelo is joining the stream.
He pops up threatening to quit on a different stream.
Interesting. Yeah, Peter's got a following.
That's not the real Otangelo.
Oh.
That explains it.
You know,
Peter,
I now have a way to check, so that is not the real Otangelo.
I think it is, isn't it?
No, it's not.
Peter, the way, all these problems you're causing for Speed, one of these days, don't be surprised if a bunch of raccoons show up at your back door.
Yep.
Cigarette hanging out of their mouth.
So anyway, guys.
Apples.
Oh, look at this plant.
Okay, can you see this? You see those little spines on it? I don't know if you can make them out.
I think so.
This is itchweed, and those little spines give you a dose of oxalic acid, and that's why you itch from itchweed. It's called urtica, I think it is, or what is the common stinging nettle, basically. And these are the seeds from the stinging nettle. And anyway, I thought I should show you those. Avoid those. They're all over the damn place. I picked them when I was on a walk because I just thought the seeds looked interesting. So I grabbed them. And the whole time I was on the walk, I started itching.
Now that we're on the subject of plants, can I give a random fun fact? Because I'm probably going to screw this up. But did anyone know that? Oh, sorry.
I just want to ask, is this stinging nettle, does poison ivy work in the same kind of way and other ones like that?
I think poison ivy is a little different. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'd have to look that up. But stinging nettle has these little spikes, and they deliver a dose of oxalic acid under your skin. And
is it available in the Netherlands?
See, when I was a little kid, I was playing with a bunch of friends in the bushes, and we ended up happening into some poison ivy. We didn't know what it was at the time, but afterwards everybody was itchy except for me, and I handled it just as much as everybody else. So apparently when I was a kid, at least,
there's immunity to it.
Yeah, I had some kind of immunity. I don't know if I'm still immune. I don't want to find out, but I don't want to try to find out, but I hope I still am. And I'm wondering if that immunity would be effective against something like this too.
I doubt it, because this one is a little. It's a pretty simple compound, oxalic acid, and it's going to irritate most animals. So these guys are smart.
That's why it survives.
Poison ivy. We'll have to look into that and see exactly. I don't know how it works. All I know is that I got it once and never want to get it again.
That's probably what all my friends would have said too.
I mean, it doesn't just make you itch; it breaks out in like horrible, bubbly scabs, and like it was
horrible.
Really
horrible
bad.
for them. Yeah. Sorry, somebody was asking about a question here.
Yeah. Okay, Andrew has a plant fact.
Yeah. So I did the part of a PBS evolution lab for one of my college classes, and I actually found something interesting about the relationship between bananas, onions, lemons, and radishes. And it was actually kind of surprising because it actually stated, and the characters showed that bananas are actually more closely related to onions than they are to lemons. Lemons are actually more closely related to radishes, because I'm going to screw this up, but as far as I can remember, onions and bananas have free what are they called? Free flowering shoots, leaves, whatever, free bundles of those, and radishes and lemons have either 4 or 5, something like that. But
my youngest daughter was saying something like this when she was about 8 years old. She's the big fan of science, and she said bananas are berries, apparently.
Really?
Bananas are fairies?
Yep.
Berries. Yeah. Not fairies, berries.
They're not fruit, and they're not Perrier's. No, they're berries. They're not fruits, apparently.
Oh, okay.
Does anyone know who left just now?
No.
Chances are it was you, but you're
Scott's
here. So.
Oh no, Scott's still here.
You're the one that always leaves, Andrew. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sitting here talking, and people are wondering if I left. So that tells you the contribution I make to the stream every day.
Oh,
so
don't
Peter,
it's because the way you present your name, it confuses people.
The Otangelo Grasso that we have in chat is not him.
No, that's not him.
Why would you think that?
Because I checked the channel.
You can check the YouTube ID. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Okay, I thought maybe you had some way of getting IPs.
So we have Otangelo.
You used to be able to get IPs out of emails. I don't know if you can do that anymore.
It depends on if the email provider hides the IP address. Most of them don't.
But Speed, I have a question. At the start of the show, you said you were grumpy. Why is that?
Yeah. Well, because of somebody giving me all these copyright strikes. I've just been grumpy ever since.
But you're about to get some recognition from pretty much the entire United States. So why would you be grumpy?
He doesn't want recognition. He wants to put out good content.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's going to be revered. It's Halloween soon, isn't it?
Yes.
See?
That's for me. I didn't know.
I think for Halloween we should all dress up as Speed.
Yeah.
Go around the neighborhood all over the country and scare children. And
then scare the shit out of children.
So is there any
that there's a new cult?
Hey, is there any place where you can order a mask of yourself so that you could wear a mask of yourself on Halloween?
I'm sure there is. Just Google it.
That would be cool.
A mask of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, get a mask of your own face and just wear that as a Halloween mask and go to a costume party with a mask of yourself. I think that'd be an awesome. I'd buy one.
You just gave me an idea.
Good.
Yeah.
You could make money on this idea, I think.
Well, no, not. I'm not going to make. I'm not going to make a physical mask, but you just gave me an idea.
I'll bet if you had your own 3D printer, you could do one up pretty easily.
Yeah. Actually, I recently learned how you can make a 3D scan.
Here it is.
Even with just your phone, and
That's
use it
unlovable.
in software like Blender and After Effects. I did not know that.
That's what I love about YouTube. If you ask a question while you're on the stream, somebody will answer it just immediately. That's pretty. It's almost like Google that way.
Well,
you know?
if you do it like that, you don't have to take a full 3D scan. You just have to take a scan of your face.
Yeah.
Put it in Blender, make it into a 3D print, and have it printed. It works.
Oh God, I'm gonna get one of these and wear it for Halloween dinner and scare my kids.
Sure, kids will love that.
Well, they'll think something happened to my face. Probably.
Have I ever
What's wrong with
told
you?
you that? Pete, have I ever told you the tale of what happens at Dutch car shows?
No.
Yeah, so at Dutch car shows, at least that was 10 years ago. I don't know if that's still a thing, but if you had an old timer or a classic car, people would make a doll and have the doll lean against the car, pretending that it was crying, and they would dress the doll up like a mechanic and stuff. So I asked my neighbor, who had a small child, I said, "Listen, kid, can you make me something like that?" So he made me a small mechanic doll for the car show. And I used to keep that thing in the corner of my living room. And then I got a new girlfriend, and I never told her about it. And in the middle of the night, she needed to go to the bathroom.
Did she have a carry permit?
Pandemonium broke out. I went downstairs and looked, and she was screaming. She thought it was Chucky.
Oh my God!
I'm not kidding. That happened. He didn't talk to me for a week.
Good thing she wasn't armed.
Not because I had the doll, but because I couldn't stop laughing when I came into the room.
Wow.
So
she was
at these car shows,
sitting in the opposite corner, pointing at the doll. Get it out! Get it out! And I couldn't stop laughing.
So at these car shows, you said they would have a life-size doll leaning against the car and crying.
Yeah,
Why
that was the thing.
all of them?
Don't ask me why.
I don't know why.
Oh, okay. Why? It seems like that would be bad advertising.
Yeah, I never figured out why, but it is a thing.
I always knew that the car companies were secretly trying to sell human-sized dolls.
Yes. That happened to me the other day. I backed my Cadillac out and I had a flat tire and I just leaned against it and I don't know what to do. It has been so long since I changed a tire. My neighbor came over and said, "Do you have a jack and a spare?" And it's like, I don't know. I never really thought about it. It's like, this is a real conundrum.
That's right. I do remember changing a lot more tires when I was young. And I guess it has something to do with not being able to afford decent cars or decent tires.
Oh, look at this. Creepy dolls.
There you go. Mine look just like that, just a different cap.
Cool.
But
those are kind of cool.
So weird.
Yeah.
No,
that
not
looks
cool.
like a weird hobby.
Apparently, I'm looking at the number plates. Apparently, it's a thing in the U.S. as well. I thought it was only here in the Netherlands.
Oh, Canada too.
Now, I haven't been to a lot of car shows, so I just maybe have missed a tradition.
Here in Canada, we call them vanity plates.
You call dolls vanity plates?
No, the license plates, the custom plates.
Yeah.
Custom plates. Yeah, but I'm talking about the doll thing at a car show.
Wow, we do that in the U.S. too. It's like it's about time we agree on something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to
Canada,
start telling everybody the Dutch are just really weird, and here's why. But apparently, the Americans do it too. But see, Americans are weird, so
you're just as weird.
Very much weird, just as weird.
See?
Okay, boys and girls, we gotta shoot it in the head now.
Okay.
Y'all ready? Y'all ready for that?
I'm never ready.
All ready for that? Sounds like some 90s music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Don't talk about music when Speed's in the room. He might get cranky or even.
Yeah, that's right. Goodbye, cruel world.
Gravity is just a theory.